Hello and welcome to another stream analyzing The Unknown Reality, Volume 2, a Seth book by Jane Roberts. I am Poetic Heretic, and as usual, I will be guiding you through the material. Also, as usual, my hair looks way different on camera than it does in person, and so as soon as I see it here, I feel like I have to fix it. But anyway, also as usual, I need a minute or two to set everything up while I make some preliminary remarks. So who knows if I'll actually be able to get comfortable here or not. Sometimes, I don't know, I swear these shorts I wear just are not the most comfortable, even though they theoretically should be. They're good shorts. Why aren't they more comfortable? Anyway, one moment, please. Okay, that worked out well. Audio's good. And I'm going to charge my phone because it needs it. Today has been a rather eventful day prior to the stream. And so here I am now in the midst of the strange energy of this day, about to take it to yet another level, yet another experience. So yes, we are on volume 2 of Unknown Reality these days, and we just started it not long ago. And I forget what I was going to say. Let's see. Live with more of the Unknown Reality, Volume 2. Come join in. Mysterious unfolding. Okay, get that tweet out to everyone. Yes, I'm coming to you from yet another hot night, and also the tweet looks good. A hot summer night. So hopefully I can stay cool enough as I do this stream. And as usual, I'll be both reading and commenting on the material. Mostly reading it, but when I have something to say, I have something to say. Remember, this is an analysis of the unknown reality. It's not just like my sitting here reading it the entire time, and it's not just my sitting here believing everything it says the entire time. It's an analysis. Critical thinking is what I encourage. Got my green tea, as I so often do, help keep me awake. I barely fucking slept at all last night. And today has been quite busy, but somehow here I am still going. So, all right, here we go. It's like, whatever, fuck it. I can't control anything anymore. I'm giving that up completely. It's just whatever at this point. All right. Let us get down to business and begin. Session 709, October 2nd, 1974, 9:21 p.m., Wednesday. At 9:18, Jane said, "I feel him around." Then, "I have an idea of what he's going to talk about, but I haven't quite got it yet, so I have to wait." Then, very quietly, going to try to get comfortable one more time. Jeez. Hopefully it's just one more time. "Good evening. Good evening, Seth. Now, dictation. Everything that is apparent three-dimensionally has an inside source out of which its appearance springs. Some of this, again, is difficult to explain. not because Rupert does not have the vocabulary, but because serial word language automatically prepackages ideas into certain patterns, and to escape prepackaging can be a task. We will try our best, however. The cell, as you understand it, is but the cell's three-dimensional face. The idea of tachyons, as currently understood, is basically legitimate, though highly distorted. Footnote. Tachyons, or metaparticles, are supposed faster-than-light particles that are thought to be possible within the context of Einstein's special theory of relativity. Physicists are still trying to experimentally discover them. As I interpret Seth here, then tachyons or something much like them will be found. End of footnote. Before a cell, as such, makes its physical appearance, there are quote-unquote disturbances in the spot in which the cell will later show itself. Those disturbances are the result of a slowing down of prior effects of faster-than-light activity, and represent the emergence into your space-time system of energy that can be effectively used and formed into the cellular pattern. The very slowing down process itself helps quote-unquote freeze the activity into a form. At the death of a cell, a reverse process occurs. The death is the escape of that energy from the cell form, its release, the release itself triggering certain stages of acceleration. There is what might be called a residue or debris energy, quote-unquote coating the cell, that stays within the system. None of this can be ascertained from within the system, that is, the initial faster-than-light activity or the deceleration afterward. Such faster-than-light behavior, then, helps form the basis for the physical universe. This characteristic is an attribute of the CUs, which have already slowed down to some extent when they form EE units. Sorry, I have to try to get comfortable yet again. Footnote. For material on CU and EE units in Volume 1, see Session 682 with Notes 3 and 4, 683 through 84, and 688. The last two sessions also contain some of Seth's comments on cellular consciousness. End of footnote. Oh, there we go. See, now I'm much more comfortable when I fucking slouch down or whatever. Jeez. What is this? I can't sit up straight. Anyway, pause, one of many at 9:37. While operating through the body's structures, consciousnesses such as your own focus largely upon the three-dimensional orientation. In out-of-body states, however, consciousness can travel faster than light, often, in fact, instantaneously. This frequently happens in the dream state, although such a performance can be achieved in varying altered states of consciousness. At such times, consciousness simply puts itself in a different relationship with time and space. The physical body cannot follow, however. It is by altering its own relationship with the physical universe that consciousness can best understand its own properties and glimpse from another vantage point that physical universe, where it will be seen in a different light. Operating outside the body, consciousness can better perceive the properties of matter. It, underlined, cannot intently experience matter, however, in the same fashion as it can when it is physically oriented. From your ordinary point of view, the traveling consciousness is off focus, not locked into physical coordinates in the designated fashion. The so-called inner world can be at least theoretically explored, however, in just such a way. Consciousness, quote-unquote, unlocks itself for a while from its usual coordinates. When this happens, the out-of-body traveler is not simply out of his or her corporal form. The person steps out of usual context. Even if an individual leaves the body and wanders about the room no more than a few feet away from where the body is located, there are alterations. The relationship of consciousness to the room is different. Footnote. One of the most unique out-of-body experiences or projections I've had was much like that which Seth describes here. It took place in April 1971, and I wrote about it in Chapter 20 of Seth Speaks. See the notes for the 583rd session. My consciousness didn't travel more than 10 feet from my body that time, but the little journey, so vivid and pleasant, did much to reinforce the enlarged view of reality that I'd gradually begun to adopt after Jane started delivering the Seth material late in 1963. I've never forgotten the sense of freedom that modest projection engendered within me, and during it, my temporal relationships were different. End of footnote. The relationship of the individual to time and space is altered. Time out of the body is quote-unquote free time by your standards. You do not age, for example, although this effect varies according to certain principles. I will mention these later. Footnote. A note added some 8 months later. Once in a great while, Seth refers to the slower rate of physical aging connected with the out-of-body state and notes that the, quote, certain principles, unquote, involved, as he does here. Jane and I have always felt that he has some very interesting material on the subject, and that we'll get to it someday. But it didn't come through before Unknown Reality was finished in April 1975. End of footnote. 948. Such a traveling consciousness may journey within physical reality, while not relating to that system in the usual manner, it may still be allied with it. From that viewpoint, matter itself will seem to appear differently than it does ordinarily. On the other hand, an out-of-body consciousness may also enter other physically attuned realities, those operating, quote, at different frequencies than your own, end quote. The basically independent nature of consciousness allows for such disentanglement. Footnote. Disentanglement immediately reminded me of the inner senses, those qualities and abilities which the personality uses to apprehend its physical or camouflage world. Seth began describing the inner senses early in 1964. His disentanglement from camouflage happened to be number 8 on a list of 9, although the order is unimportant. Jane devoted chapter 19 of the Seth material to the inner senses. End of footnote. The body consciousness maintains its own equilibrium and acts somewhat like a maintenance station. Any discussion of the unknown reality must necessarily involve certain, usually dismissed hypotheses about the characteristics of consciousness itself. The world as you know it is the result of a complicated set of quote-unquote codes, as given at the beginning of the last session, each locked in one to the other, each one in those terms dependent upon the others. Your precise perceived universe in all of its parts, then, results from coded patterns, each one fitting perfectly into the next. Alter one of these, and to some underlined extent you step out of that context, underlined. Any event of any kind that does not directly, immaculately intersect with your space-time continuum does not happen, in your terms, but falls away. It becomes probable in your system, but seeks its own quote-unquote level, and becomes actualized as it falls into place in another reality whose quote-unquote coded sequence fits its own, period. Pause at 10:10. When consciousness leaves the body, therefore, it alters some of the coordinates. There are various questions involving the nature of perception that then occur, and these will be discussed somewhat later, but see note 4. Consciousness is equipped to focus its main energy, in your terms at least, generally within the body, or to stray from it for varying amounts of time. Theoretically, your human consciousness can take many different roads while still maintaining its physical base. In far past historical times, different kinds of orientation were experimented with, parentheses, as by the quote-unquote sleepwalkers described in the last session, for instance. Your own present private experience can give hints and clues about such other cultures, for those abilities reside within the underlined natural framework now, but are underdeveloped. To one extent or another, therefore, all of the potentials of the species are now latent within each individual. Often these spring to the surface through events that may seem bizarre. The quote-unquote unknown reality is unknown only because you have not looked for its aspects in yourself. You have been taught to pay almost exclusive attention to your exterior behavior. Privately, then, much of your inner life escapes you. You often structure your life according to that exterior pattern of events. These, while important, are the result of your own inner world of activity. That inner world is your only real connection with the exterior events, and the objective details make sense only because of the subjectivity that gave them birth. Footnote. Much of the material in Appendix 12, including the notes, deals with connections between our inner and outer worlds. End of footnote. In the same way, when you look at the current state of the world or at history, you often structure your perception so that only the topmost surfaces of events are seen. Using the same kind of reasoning, you are apt to judge the historic past of your species in very limited terms, and to overlook great do's in your history because they seem to make no sense. Long pause, eyes closed. While you believe, for example, that underlined technology as you understand it, underlined, alone means progress, and that progress underlined necessarily requires overriding physical manipulation of the environment that must forever continue, you will judge past civilizations in that light. This will blind you to certain accomplishments and other orientations to such an extent that you will not be able to see evidence of achievement when it appears before your eyes. In other words, I think what Seth is saying here is that we are so accustomed to seeing things, perceiving things in a certain way that can blind us from entire other dimensions or aspects of reality, including our history as we know it. Well over a 1-minute pause at 10:30, eyes closed. Give us a moment. You have not worked with the power of thought or feeling, but only with its physical effects. Therefore, to you only physically materialized events are obvious. You do not accept your dreams as real, for example, but as a rule you consider them fantasies, imaginative happenings. Until very recently, you generally believed that all information came to the body through the outer senses, and ignored all evidence to the contrary. It was impossible to imagine civilizations built upon data that were mentally received, consciously accepted, and creatively used. Footnote. In Volume 1, see the 689th session. In Volume 2, see the references in Note 7 for Session 708. End of footnote. Under such circumstances, scientists could hardly look for precognition in cells. Footnote. So far in the 2 volumes of Unknown Reality, Seth has discussed the freedom of cells from time, along with a number of their other attributes in well over a dozen sessions. In session 684 in Volume 1, he said at 10:07, quote, "Your body's condition at any time is not so much the result of its own comprehension of its quote-unquote past history as it is of its own comprehension of future probabilities. The cells precognate." End quote. End of footnote. Try to get comfortable yet again. Jeez. I'm just not having good luck with that tonight. They did not believe it existed to begin with. The human body itself has limitless potentials and great variations that allow for different kinds of orientation. Probable man represents alternate man from your viewpoint, alternate versions of the species. The same applies individually. In out-of-body states, many people have encountered probable selves and probable realities. Wow, there's literally a spider just dangling down onto my desk right now. It's behind the camera, so I can't show it, but it's just a very tiny spider. There's a spider and a web symbolizing connecting to other strands, other levels of reality that are normally unseen, the unknown reality or realities. The spider is now crawling on the cord that my microphone is attached to, and it's crawling away from me, which is good. Anyway, the show must go on. Where were we? I think I'm just going to back up a bit to make sure we don't miss anything. The same applies individually. In out-of-body states, many people have encountered probable selves and probable realities. They have also journeyed into the past and the future as you think of them. The private psyche contains within itself the knowledge of its own probabilities, and it contains a mirror in which the experience of the species can at least be glimpsed. Now I've got to keep my eye on the spider while I'm doing this, oh boy. You are used to a particular kind of orientation, accustomed to using your consciousness in one particular manner. In order to study the unknown reality, however, you must try to see what else your consciousness can do. This really means that you must learn to regain the true feeling of yourself. There are two main ways of trying to find out about the nature of reality: an exterior method and an interior one. The methods can be used together, of course, and from your vantage point must be for the greatest efficiency, I believe is how that should be said. You are well acquainted with the exterior means that involve studying the objective universe and collecting facts upon which certain deductions are made. In this book, therefore, we will be stressing interior ways of attaining not necessarily facts, but knowledge and wisdom. Now, facts may or may not give you wisdom. They underlined can, if they are slavishly followed, even lead you away from true knowledge. Wisdom shows you the insides of facts, so to speak, and the realities from which facts emerge. Much of the remainder of Unknown Reality, then, will deal with an inside look at the nature of reality, and with some exercises that will allow you to see yourself and your world from another perspective. Later, I intend to say far more about some civilizations that, in your terms, came before your own. But see the last sentence in Note 4. Before you can understand their orientation, we will have to speak about various alternate kinds of consciousness and out-of-body experience. These will help you to understand how other kinds of cultures could operate in ways so alien to your own. Louder. You may take a break or end the session as you prefer. We'll take the break. 10:55. Jane's delivery had become somewhat faster and very absorbed as it progressed, just as they had before our 3-month layoff from bookwork. After session 707, her trances for Unknown Reality were proving to be more quote-unquote difficult to initiate than those for the previous Seth books. Footnote. Appendixes 4 and 5 in Volume 1 show the insights Jane herself has gained so far about the more complicated trances she experiences while delivering the sessions for Unknown Reality. As noted in Appendix 4, she waits for that quote-unquote certain clear focus she needs before taking up the challenges of, quote, translating multidimensional experience into linear terms and thought patterns, end quote. And from Appendix 5, quote, it's as though my consciousness is trying to use a new kind of organization, for me, for it, and so there's a kind of unfamiliarity, end quote, end of footnote. So it looks like the spider's crawling around the back of the speaker now. Okay. She often had to wait for just the right moment to get back into dictation following a break, too. So tonight, after we'd shared an apple, she sat rather impatiently anticipating Seth's return. Resume, finally, at 11:25. Okay, well, they took a break. I'm going to take a tiny break. Still uncomfortable. Maybe if I just get up and sit back down, then I'll be comfortable. One moment. Okay. I think that helped. Hopefully. Resume finally at 11:25. Wow, it was 11:25 here 3 minutes ago. Dictation. We will be discussing alternate methods of orientation that consciousness can take when allied with flesh, trying to give the reader some personal experience with such altered conditions, along with a brief history of some civilizations that utilize these unofficial orientations as their predominant method of focus. To become familiar with the unknown reality, you must, to some extent, grant that it exists, then, and be willing to step aside from your usual behavior. All of the methods given are quite natural, inherent in the body structure, and even biologically anticipated. Your consciousness could not leave your body and return to it again unless there were biological mechanisms that allowed for such a performance. I have said, as at 9:48, that the body can indeed carry on, performing necessary maintenance activities while the main consciousness is detached from it. To some extent, it can even perform simple chores. Pause. In sleep, in fact, it is not at all necessary that the main consciousness be alert in the body. Only in certain kinds of civilizations, for that matter, is such a close body and main consciousness relationship necessary. There are other situations, therefore, in which consciousness ordinarily strays much further, returning to the body as a home station and basis of operation, relying upon it for certain kinds of perception only, but not depending upon it for the entire picture of reality. Physical life alone does not necessarily require the underlined kind of identification of self with flesh that is your own. This does not mean that an alienation results in those realities, simply a relationship in which the body and consciousness relate to other events. Only your beliefs, training, and neurological indoctrination prevent you from recognizing the true nature of your consciousness while you sleep. You close out those data. In that period, however, at an inner order of events, you are highly active and do much of the interior mental work that will later appear as physical experience. Slowly at 11:43. While your consciousness is so engaged, your body consciousness performs many functions that are impossible for it during your waking hours. The greatest biological creativity takes place while you sleep, for example, and certain cellular functions are accelerated. Footnote. Perhaps I should have asked Seth to be more specific about those certain cellular functions that are accelerated in the sleep state, but I didn't. I was tiring. It's well known that parts of the brain are much more active when we sleep than when we're awake, for instance, but I doubt that Seth was referring to such phenomena here. The brain itself never sleeps, of course, since it's endlessly involved in running the vastly complicated physiological functions of the body. Sleep for the conscious mind results when neural activity in the reticular activating system, the RAS, which screens the sensory information reaching consciousness, falls below a minimum level. End of footnote. Some disengagement of your main consciousness and the body is therefore obviously necessary, or it would not occur. Sleeping is not a byproduct of waking life. In greater terms, you are just as awake when you are asleep, but the focus of your awareness is turned in other directions. As you know, you can live for years while in a coma, but you could not live for years without ever sleeping. Even in a coma, there is mental activity, though it may be impossible to ascertain it from the outside. A certain kind of free conscious behavior is possible when you are underlined not physically oriented, as you are in the waking state, and that activity is necessary even for physical survival. This also has to do with pulsations of energy in which consciousness as you know it now exercises itself, using native abilities that cannot be expressed through physical orientation alone. Your own main consciousness has the ability to travel faster than light, as noted at 937, but those perceptions are too fast, and the neurologically structured patterns that you accept cannot capture them. For that matter, underlined cellular comprehension and